This is the second one of Andrew Berzins. If you're watching this one, there's a first one, part one. You watch it first. What I was saying, Andrew Berzins is, and his buddies sent this stuff up to Dr. Bradford, and they withheld the fact that I had court February 15th and that, and they had picked my lawyers and that. So I ended up being found mentally insane at the time of the crime and breaking these conditions, which I didn't have. So years later, I finally got that bum up on the stand, Andrew Berzins. And Andrew Berzins turns around, I get him up on the stand, and Dr. Bradford, when I'd speed him into court, he wouldn't come because what happened is 96, I was found wrongfully convicted. It came out that I was wrongfully convicted. I was promised a criminal investigation by Ron Liberté, another buddy of his, and so what happened is this thing never happened, and Dr. Bradford later on turned around and said wouldn't go along with them trying to lock me up for life in a mental institution. So what happened is Dr. Bradford washed his hands of it, and the Royal Ottawa Hospital, they ran. He said there's nothing wrong with him, he's coming after him, and this, and it was in front of a bunch of witnesses, and that we got statements from it. But what happened is I kept protesting over and over and over again, and lawyers would tell me, I'd got arrested a few times, and one time a lawyer told me, he said, listen, you don't have to tell. I never talked to the man before in my life, and he was from the James Lockyer office, one guy who runs Aidwick. And he turns around and this lawyer tells me, he says, I've had conversations with the Crown attorneys in Ottawa about how corrupt how they fixed a trial against you, how badly you got screwed. And this is what they're talking about. Everybody knows about it because I protested so much and sold their perjury in the newspaper and everything else. Now, I brought Andrew Berzins up on the stand in 2000. And I put him up there and I asked him about the February 15th. And what happened is that with the cop, as I asked him, the February 15th charge, they just kind of disappeared. And he turns around and says, no. And then I said, well, then I said it again. And he turns around, oh yeah, that was an honest mistake by the police. Now here's Andrew Berzins now. And I asked him, when did you find this out? Well, he knew the first day. But in May he wrote a statement saying, I know from the police statements that Dave was busted on February 15th for being in the courthouse unless for a scheduled court appearance, and that he assaulted the police. Well, they beat and tortured me. Well, when he says that, he knew the police officers were lying, and he knew I had court. Same as Peter Griffiths, his buddies, and everybody else. Like I said, here's the February 15th transcript. The Dr. Bradford's still saying that I never had court that day in public, and everything else. And that's why the guy won't show up at court, because he says I broke these conditions, and now everybody's saying that now I've got the transcript showing that the charges were dropped in that. I also a cop by the name of Ian Davison. He on these charges that I was talking about with Andrew Berzins later on in 2000 when I got him up on the stand. Ian Davison writes a letter a thing saying that I've never broke the conditions. I've always abided with the conditions of staying away from Andrew Berzins and not being in the courthouse unless for a scheduled court appearance. But there's the problem is the police complaint, and the police are still saying that I had these conditions, like the chiefs of police and the police complaint system. They did like 3 investigations. Mr. White, chief of police now, is still saying I never had court February 15th. There's nothing wrong with the police. But what happened is I was found mentally insane at the time of the crime. So when it comes out that, hey, there was no crime, like they did in 96, it was covered up, and then it came out again. Andrew Berzins and them started changing their stories. And Andrew Berzins spilled the beans on all his buddies up there. He talked about talking about Liberté and how I was protesting. Well, right on the sign was, and I asked him, did Liberté ever say anything to you about he had promised criminal investigation? And like I said, I questioned him, when did you find this out? Well, he knew the first day. That's the thing, he knew the first day. Because he was talking to the cop, and they told the cop to give him giving me a trespassing notice. That's what the cop states in his statement. So he knows that the cops lied. He knew that day I had court. Plus, Peter Griffiths had told him, he's testified in court that Peter Griffiths had come to him before the charges were dropped. So he's letting him know that Peter Griffiths knew and everybody else, all his buddies knew, but they withheld that fact from the doctor at the beginning. And then they all stand on the doctor's statement that I was found mentally insane at the time of the crime, of being paranoid delusions, about prosecuting delusions. And now they're admitting that, hey, I never even had any conditions. So that's the way Andrew Berzins is, and I've been protesting for years and years and years. But you know, like the fun thing about this is I've given these documents to reporters, and now up in 1998 January 4th, there was a newspaper story. They did it on attorney Andrew Berzins, shows them on the books and law books and all that. And there was one question they asked. See, and I'd just like to say this to Andrew, 4 days before, I passed them the information of you guys fixing trials. So they knew when they were reporting to you. And when they asked you this question, in light of the Paul Moran and David Milgaard cases, 2 men found convicted of murders and then later found not guilty, have you ever second guessed yourself? They already knew that you fixed a trial, Andrew. So you're sitting there lying through your teeth, and then you go on to talk about, because now it says, I think in a way of criminal cases now take place has reduced the possibility of wrongful convictions because now we have rules of greater disclosure. Okay, well, how about the rule of disclosure? When they drop the charges, you don't break the guy with breaking the conditions. You don't cover up that he had court and that the police statements are all lies and all that. Like, isn't that part of disclosure? Don't you give disclosure to the person's lawyer that you picked, saying that, listen, the guy had court, he didn't have any conditions, or you just tell him, oh yeah, he's still got conditions, like you did to Bradford and everybody else. So Andrew, you're sitting there and you're pretending like you're something else, and you're you know, and Andrew, I got you pegged 6 ways to Sunday, you know, and like I was saying to your wife. Now, there's a Bible verse, and this is the part I really love. This is the Bible verses. You know, it says, "Woe to lawyers." It talks about lawyers being greedy, wicked, hypocrites, and fools. And I used to say that in court just to get you guys going. I'd say, Jesus says lawyers are greedy, wicked, hypocrites, and fools. And I believe. And I'd watch your buddies and your judges go wild when I'd say stuff like that. And then you do the most stupidest things, and that's why I do it. So, you know, that's what it is. It says, "Woe to lawyers that cause great burdens and carry no weight, to weigh men down with burdens hard to bear and won't lift a finger." Well, let's think about that. Okay, Andrew, your buddy's covered up, or still covered up, that I had court February 15th. Saying, you know, the Liberté is still trying to cover it up. The police complaint just did another one. Vern White's still covered up, that I never had condition to stay away from you and all this. And Dr. Bradford, he won't even show up into court anymore, your buddy. And that's the guy that gave you that, probably nominated you for that Amethyst Award for the Mental Health Act that I heard you got in 2000. Another guy that knows you is a guy named Mark Eugene Wallace, a doctor that I've known for years, for 20 years. Okay? The other day I was just talking to him, and he turns around and he says, you know, Andrew Berzin's a great guy and all this and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. He did some wonderful works and all that. And I said, oh yeah, he won the Amethyst Award, eh? And he turns around, he looks at me. Yeah, I know about it. So he turns around. Okay, we're going to part 3 now. Okay, in a second. But he had talked about the Amethyst Award. Now, Bradford gave you the award. Why? It's because you got him with 200 beds. That Royal Hospital. You know, Bradford knows you were fixing a trial. We were promised a criminal investigation right in front of Bradford and the lawyers and everybody else. So that's a nice reward. But we're going to go to part 3 now. Okay.